Your Lordship, there are primarily four issues for determination before this honorable court. The first two, which I would be taking, and my learned co-counsel will be taking the last two issues. I would be firstly arguing on whether or not the impugned rules, the IT rules of 2021, withstand the basic structure doctrine for judging its constitutional validity. The second leg of my argument, the second issue, is going to be whether they are under the permissible ambit of delegated legislation, Your Lordships. My co-counsel will be taking up the third issue, dealing with the constitutionality of the blanket ban as has been imposed on petition number 1 herein. And the last issue to be dealt with for determination before this honorable bench is with regard to the constitutionality of the arrest of the grievance officer, who is petitioner number 2 in this matter, Your Lordship. With your permission, I would like to proceed with my first argument.
Yes.
Please. Much obliged, Your Lordship. Your Lordship, the basic thrust of my argument is going to be judging the constitutionality of these impugned rules which have been enacted on the 25th of February of this year under the Parent Act, which is the Information and Technology Act 2000. My argument would be premised on the basic structure doctrine, as has been very carefully curated and culled out in the much celebrated decision of the Honorable Supreme Court of India in the matter of Keshavananda Bharti versus State of Kerala. Your Lordships, there are many constituents of the basic structure doctrine. However, I would be limiting my arguments to three basic constituents as had been recognized by the landmark judgment. The first of which is going to be the principle of separation of powers. The second is going to be breach of fundamental rights. And the third is going to be under the aegis of the supremacy of the Constitution, Your Lordships. Proceeding to the first leg of my arguments, Your Lordship, the basic principle of separation of powers, as Your Lordships would be very well aware of, is the fact that one organ of the government cannot usurp the functions of another organ of the government. That is the basic premise, that is the basic principle of the separation of powers. In a variety of a plethora of Supreme Court judgments, it has been culled out that what is not permissible is one organ taking up the functions of another. In this regard, Your Lordships, I would like to draw the attention of this honorable bench to part 3 of the impugned rules, which prescribe a 3-tiered grievance redressal mechanism. In particular, Your Lordship, my grievance is towards the 3rd tier of the grievance redressal mechanism with regard to abrogating the principle of separation of powers. What my humble submission in this regard is going to be is that the interdepartmental committee, which is an oversight mechanism under the grievance redressal mechanism, under the impugned rules, it is headed by an authorized officer who is appointed by the government. Secondly, it is chiefly consisting of serving officials from different ministries of the government. Now, herein what is happening, Your Lordship, is the fact that the executive, as Your Lordship would be very, very well aware, the interpretation of law is something which is the function of the judiciary. The execution of the law is the function of the executive. However, in this matter, by prescribing the interdepartmental committee to decide questions of law, what is in a sense is happening is that the executive is taking over the functions of the judiciary because they are deciding complaints which involve interpretation of the law, which involve questions of law, and hence in itself abrogating the principle of separation of powers as it has been very carefully curated by the Honorable Supreme Court of India in the Keshavananda Bharti.
Counsel, hang on a second. I have a query to ask, please.
Yeah.
So what you are proposing to propound before us is that any kind of this mechanism that is set out, which involves officers, is it to the exclusion of the judiciary? You mean to say, is there an impact on Article 226 or Article 32 rights?
Definitely not, Your Lordship. Certainly not. That is not what my submission is. My submission in this regard is just primarily this, that when the interpretation of law is concerned, the judiciary, the judicial officers of the court are supposed to be interpreting the law. However, the executive...
Counsel, are you not aware of the entire line and length of law from L. Chandra Kumar onwards, where the tribunals that have been set up in various fields have been affirmed by the Honorable Supreme Court? And now there exist tribunals which are quasi-judicial bodies, who are the first fact-finding bodies. But if it does not take away the power of judicial review, the whole premise that you're making is that it is in violation of separation of powers appears to be problematic, at least to me.
Your Ladyship, if I may be permitted to answer your the question that has been posed to the council, Your Ladyship, what I am suggesting in this matter is that Tier 2 also has the Tier 2 of the grievance redressal mechanism. It consists of domain experts. So, as is duly noted as pointed out by Your Ladyship, it is true that certain domain experts can decide on their area of expertise. However, my humble submission is that when a question of law is to be decided, there should be an oversight. And also, what cannot be ignored in this matter, Your Ladyship, is the fact that the executive itself has enacted this law. So these impugned rules. So what is essentially happening is that the government is becoming the complainant. It is sitting as a judge of violation of these rules, and in that in itself there is a clear abrogation of.
Let's test your argument, counsel. Let's test your argument. Let's take the government nominee out of here. If the government nominee is not there, does this not become a completely incestuous exercise where you are framing a redressal mechanism, the body against whom the complaint is there are no outsiders to that, so there's no sort of a third party overlook there. And the argument of separation of powers is absolutely not maintainable in my opinion. Of course, I'll see what my colleagues feel like, but the separation of powers is a doctrine that will come into play only once the power of judiciary has been taken away.
Your Ladyship, as
so why don't you try your second point? Why don't you try the next point?
Before we get there, I just have another question. So your application that we are talking of right now is an intermediary, right?
Yes, Your Ladyship.
And you're saying that your concern is with the grievance redressal mechanism, the 3-tier grievance redressal mechanism.
Yeah, yes,
right?
Yes, Your Ladyship.
But I think if you look at the rules again, the 3-tier mechanism is not prescribed for intermediaries. It's prescribed for the publishers of digital media, which is news and other content. So why are we sort of getting into this whole space for a setup which is not prescribed for your category of applications in the first place?
Am I permitted to answer the query, Your Ladyship?
Yes, of course, please. So sorry.
Your Ladyship, my submission in this regard is that there are two petitioners in this matter. Firstly, the application, the audio-based social media application, and the second one is Mr. Jandu. However, we have not just approached took the aid of this honorable court just for the action of the respondent state. However, we're also challenging the constitutionality of certain provisions of the IT rules in itself, which is why I am going to be, my co-counsel is going to be talking about the violation as specifically on both the petitioners. I would be arguing on the constitutionality of these rules. Your Ladyship, this is why I've advanced this argument, because my entire premise is that the action which is emanating from these impugned rules are in itself unconstitutional. So any action which is taken under the rules cannot be held to be justified, Your Ladyship.
Understood. But the rules and the mechanism which is prescribed for intermediaries, that to your mind is not unconstitutional, right? You're saying that the setup for the grievance redressal mechanism which is prescribed for different category of platforms, that is a question of challenge in your mind.
Yes, Your Ladyship, I am in my first leg. I am arguing on the unconstitutionality of the entire mechanism which has been prescribed under these rules. That is my humble submission.
Sure.
Shall I proceed?
Yes.
One question, counsel. Is your argument that the 3-tier mechanism, where the 2nd-tier mechanism is headed by retired judges of Supreme Court or High Court, we could not have a government nominee sitting as a 3rd-tier mechanism? Is that your argument on separation of powers?
Your Lordship, as my co-counsel would also be highlighting, in this particular matter, what has happened is that there has been no following of this grievance redressal mechanism that has been prescribed by the government itself. So they have prescribed these rules and they have also not complied with it, because they have straight on gone and arrested my client herein, the petitioner number 2, without any no appellate forum as it has been prescribed under the impugned rules itself has been followed. That is something that my co-counsel would be dealing with. But your lordship, my humble submission in this regard is that all tiers, if they are interpreting the constitution, interpreting questions of law, they should have a member of the judiciary who should be interpreting the law. The executive cannot be made judge of the complaints, or the complainant also, and be sitting as a judge of important vital questions of law, your lordship. That is my humble submission.
One question I would like to put.
Yes.
Do you know anything about quasi-judicial bodies where the executive has the, they have that kind of power? So every time the separation of power doctrine cannot come in, because it is practically impossible to have a judiciary to, govern the administrative functions of a body. So how about that? How, I agree, how the doctrine of separation of power doctrine is maintainable in your arguments?
Am I permitted to answer the question, your lordship?
Sure, go on.
Your lordship, my humble submission, if I can just take the instance of the Honorable National Company Law Tribunal. That is a tribunal which decides questions related to violations under the Companies Act and insolvency proceedings also, as your lordships would be very well aware. My humble submission in this regard, if I contrast what is happening in this grievance redressal mechanism and contrast it with just the NCLAT, that is just the first example that I can think of from the top of my head. What happens is it is presided by a person who's a technical member, and also one person who is a part of the judicial, he is a judicial officer. So under no circumstance am I advancing this argument, your lordship, that domain experts should not exercise their discretion and decide questions with regard to their expertise. However, when NCLT, a forum like the Honorable NCLT, has two presiding officers, wherein there is a judicial member who is deciding questions of law, and there is on the other side also a judicial officer who is interpreting a technical member who is interpreting the area of expertise, for instance, company law, why can the grievance redressal mechanism, which provides not just one but two appellate forums, why can it not have even one person of the judiciary in the third, which is the final stage of the appellate, the final appellate forum for deciding questions related to violations under the IT rules, your lordship. That is my humble submission in this regard.
All right.
Shall I proceed?
Yes, please.
If can the court master just let me know how much time is left?
You have around 2 minutes left.
Sorry?
Don't worry, you go on for 5 minutes because we've asked you many questions. So you can
Much obliged.
take 5 minutes.
Much obliged. Your ladyship, in the same leg of the argument, one more point I would like to make, which is I would like to draw the attention of this honorable bench to rule number 16 of the impugned rules. Your ladyship, your lordships, the basic thing that rule number 16 is providing for is an emergency power. What that entails is basically the ministry, the secretary of the Ministry of I&B, the person is given the right to block content without affording any opportunity of hearing to the person who is the author of the information. Secondly, the honorable bench also should note the fact that there is no provision under the impugned rules for any appeal whatsoever of the decision of the interdepartmental committee. That in itself, which I will also be coming to in just a few minutes, is entirely arbitrary, your lordships. Under no firstly, you're interpreting the questions of law, which you're not competent to do as the executive, and secondly, you're also not giving the opportunity of the person who is being pleaded in the matter, who is being tried in the matter, to be appealing against the decisions of, which is completely arbitrary in my opinion, your lordship. Coming to the second part of my arguments with regards to fundamental rights. I would just like to, since there is a paucity of time, the strongest point of that I would like to advance before your lordships is going to be with regards to the very well celebrated judgment of the Honorable Supreme Court of India in the matter of Justice K.S. Puttaswamy versus Union of India, wherein the right to privacy has been recognized as a fundamental right by a 9-judge bench of the Honorable Supreme Court of India. Your lordships, my humble submission in this regard is going to be limited to, it is going to be directed towards Rule 3 and Rule 4 of the impugned rules. Your lordship, the first thing that I would like to highlight is that at present, on the 3rd of October 2021, there is no law in place which protects the data privacy of users. Also, the second thing that I would like to highlight is the principle of data minimization. What that entails basically is limiting data collection to what is necessary to fulfill the specific purpose of data processing. Your lordships, my humble submission in this regard is, in so much as the impugned rules are prescribing a traceability clause wherein the intermediary is supposed to store, firstly, there is no prescription as to how far back my client is supposed to store the information that might be required at any point in time by the government. Firstly, there is no prescription as to that. That in itself is not something which can be considered reasonable, your lordship. Second thing is that the permanent storage is not a technical necessity for providing services on the internet, and that has been recognized. The third thing is that what your lordships, I forgot to mention exactly what Rule 4 prescribes. If your lordships would pardon me, Rule 4 basically provides for the intermediaries to identify significant social media intermediaries to identify the first originator of the information. That is the basis on which I am placing my arguments. The first thing, the other thing that I would like to say is that when the government is asking us to store information in a permanent manner, that in itself is in derogation of the principle of data minimization, which has been categorically recognized under Article 5 of the General Data Protection Regulation of the European Union. Your lordship, in a country like India, which has no data privacy laws in place at the moment, potential data privacy breaches is something that cannot be ignored. And with the fact that end-to-end encryption is something that my client is basing, that forms the backbone of the services of my client, your lordship, petitioner number 1 herein, and such a right for the government to impose a traceability clause for us to comply with is completely in derogation of the right to privacy, which has been recognized by the celebrated judgment in the matter of Justice K.S. Puttaswamy versus Union of India. Your lordship, coming to the third leg of my argument, the basic premise for invoking the jurisdiction of this honorable court under Article 32 is that first, there has to be a violation of a fundamental right. And secondly, the second thing has to be that there has to be a direct and proximate action of the respondent, which has led to the violation of the fundamental right. There is no say about this. There is no iota of doubt about the fact that the blanket ban has been imposed by the government state, the respondent herein, and therefore there can be no more, as apparent as it is, there can be no more direct connection between the violation of the fundamental right of the petitioners herein and the state, the action of the respondent state. Your lordship, as has been established by judicial precedents, the substance, the real effect, and the impact on the fundamental rights has to always override any interpretation of when deciding constitutional validity of a particular enactment, your lordship. In this particular regard, my humble submission to my first argument is going to be the basic structure of the basic structure of the constitution, as it been the principle as it been culled out in the Keshwananda Bharti case, has been completely derogated by the enactment of these rules, the impugned rules of 2021, and they're completely unconstitutional. They do not withstand the basic structure doctrine. Coming to my, if I may be allowed, can I proceed to my second issue, your lordships? Much obliged, your lordship. My second issue, I'm going to make it very short. My humble submission in this regard is, the permissible ambit of delegated legislation is firstly that the delegated legislation cannot under any circumstance go above and beyond the Parent Act, which in this matter is happening. Clearly, Your Lordship, if I can draw the attention of this honorable bench, if my researcher would be permitted to just highlight the object of the Parent Act, the IT Act. May I be permitted? May my researcher would be presenting the screen.
Yes, please. Please go ahead.
It's page number. It's page number 285. Thank you. Your Lordship, if I can just attract the attention of this honorable bench to the words herein, an act to provide legal recognition to electronic data. That would be all. Thank you. I don't need this thing anymore. The Parent Act, in its statement of object, specifies, Your Lordships, that it is an act to provide legal recognition to electronic data. In my comprehension, the impugned rules under no circumstance are firstly, the grievance redressal mechanism or the traceability clause for that matter does not have any relation whatsoever to the object of the Parent Act, which the Parent Act is seeking to establish. And in that in itself, it is going against the principle of delegated legislation. Also, Your Lordships, I would just like to specify, since there's a paucity of time, I cannot highlight the specific paragraphs for your convenience. But if Your Lordships would peruse the very celebrated judgment of in the Delhi Laws Act, which has culled out what is the meaning of delegated legislation. Honorable Chief Justice Kania had said that the legislature cannot delegate to lay down a policy underlying, and I emphasize here, a rule of conduct. What in itself is happening is firstly the part 3 in itself says code of ethics. It is prescribing a rule of conduct for the social media intermediaries. May I be permitted? May I just get 2 more minutes, Your Lordships? To just
Counsel, I think you should end because we have a paucity of time also.
I'll just sum up my arguments in 2 more minutes, Your Ladyship.
One line, please, Counsel.
Your Ladyship, the only submission that I would like to make is that firstly, it is not within the permissible ambit of delegated legislation. And secondly, it is also against Article 13(2), which says that the state cannot pass any law which is an abrogation of Part 3 of the Constitution of India. And with that, my co-counsel will be taking up the rest of the issues. It was a pleasure pleading before this honorable bench. Yes, my co-counsel, please. Thank you.
Thank you for your very valuable assistance, Counsel.
With the kind permission of this court, I seek to proceed with the next leg of the arguments, Your Lordships. Much obliged, Your Lordships. Much obliged, Your Lordships. Your Lordships, I would be carrying forward the arguments from here, and I will place mainly 2 issues before the consideration of this honorable bench. The first one of which will be that the blanket ban imposed upon the petitioner platform, that is petitioner number 1, is completely unconstitutional, arbitrary, and without the ambit of the law. And the second one being that the arrest of the grievance officer of petitioner number 1, that is the petitioner number 2, is unconstitutional and without the authority of the law. Your Lordships, my first submission here in this regard with the blanket ban is that it is completely without the authority of the law because, Your Lordships, this is a clear-cut case of non-application of mind by the government. Your Lordships, they have blindly misapplied Rule 4, Clause 2 of the IT Rules 2021 to us, wherein the rule clearly says that it is applicable only to messaging applications. Our application, Your Lordships, if you may kindly consider, is only a live audio chat platform and not a messaging application. And hence, the application of Rule 4, Clause 2 should clearly be inapplicable to our case. Also, Your Lordships, if I may be permitted to submit, that there is no provision of the law at all which permits a blanket ban to be imposed upon an intermediary. Your Lordships, as Section 69A as well mentions in the IT Act 2000, which is a parent act to the rules, it was also affirmed in the Shreya Singhal case. Your Lordships, it clearly provides for only blocking of information and does not provide for a blanket ban. I would like to attract the kind attention of this honorable bench to the IT Act Section 2, subsections V and W, which create a distinction between information and intermediary. And therefore, when the IT Act itself under Section 69 is allowing only for the blockage of information, there can be no justification for banning the entire intermediary. In fact, I would urge the respondents to prove under any case where they derive the words blanket ban from, where they derive the authority to absolutely place an arbitrary ban upon the petitioner platform in this case, Your Lordships. Also, the ban here, Your Lordships, as I would also refer to the proviso of Rule 4, Clause 1, in this case, is completely arbitrary. Because number one, Your Lordships, it is violative of the natural justice principle of audio alterum partem. No opportunity to be heard has been afforded to the petitioner platform, Your Lordships. There has been no notice before either banning the platform or before arresting the grievance officer in this case, Your Lordships. Also, it violates the test of proportionality that was laid down in the celebrated judgment of K.S. Puttaswamy versus Union of India, Your Lordships. Rather than blocking or removing content that would be violative of government policy, they have removed the entire application from user access. Also, Your Lordships, I would place this before your kind consideration that this is entirely a politically motivated move. Just because we could not crack down on a dissenter of the government, this person who had made the statement on the platform, Your Lordships, this statement was made specifically against a political party and the affiliate of the political party that is mentioned in the facts of the case, the Shita Sena. And just because we could not crack down on the dissenter of the government, they banned the platform. And therefore, also, Your Lordships, I would like to indicate that Mr. Pansu, who was the moderator of the chat room wherein the impugned statement was made, was not arrested because he was a member of the ruling party, Your Lordships. And therefore, I would humbly submit that this politically motivated ban be lifted from the petitioner platform, Your Lordships. Also,
have you seen any other cases where Section 79, any rules in any other country? So this intermediary, the enactment is there across board in IT Acts in various parts of the world. Are there any other cases where you've seen that there are similar rules as the rule in India or the new enactments in India?
Your Ladyship, not that I'm specifically aware of, but the rules that have been enacted by the executive in this case, that is the rules of 2021, the IT rules. Such extreme rules are not to be seen in any other part of the world, Your Lordships, as far as my knowledge goes about the rules in other countries, Your Lordships.
And can you tell us what was the interpretation placed on Section 79 in any judgment of the Supreme Court?
Your Lordships, we claim
before this.
Your Ladyship, I submit that we claim the safe harbor provisions under 79 subsection 1. And recently, the case of Twitter that came to notice of the country, Your Ladyships, under certain circumstances, safe harbor provisions were withdrawn, but neither a blanket ban was imposed upon them and nor an arrest in any case was made in regard to the case of Twitter. Therefore, my humble submission is, Your Ladyship, that no such incidents so far have been coming to light in pertinence of India as such, that a grievance officer may be arrested.
Very well, very well.
Much obliged, Your Ladyship. Also, Your Ladyship, I am contending that this blanket ban is completely arbitrary in view of Article 14 of the Constitution of India. Because, Your Ladyship, in the celebrated judgment of E.P. Royappa versus Union of India, it was clearly posited that arbitrariness is completely antithetical to equality. And when this order is entirely arbitrary in that it violates the principles of natural justice, there was no notice provided to the petitioner platform. This order, being arbitrary, is ultra vires the Constitution under Article 14. Also, Your Ladyships, if I may be permitted to posit, that it is also violative of Article 21, Your Lordships, because I would like to bring it to light that the government itself, in the case of Subramanian Swamy versus Union of India, had the government had asserted that every right engulfs and incorporates within itself, I'm quoting from the judgment, Your Lordships, every right engulfs within itself the duty to respect others' rights. And therefore, the government, the respondent state, in forcing us to violate the privacy of our users, is forcing us to violate their Article 21 rights, and therefore is violative of our Article 21 rights as well, Your Lordships.
Counsel,
Therefore,
before you go any further, I would like to ask 2 questions and would like you to answer them.
certainly.
First question that I have is that you are a corporate entity. How are you maintaining a writ petition with the, seeking violation of fundamental rights, raising all these constitutional points? What is your locus here? And second aspect I want to ask is, you seem to be resisting all kinds of, so you and your co-counsel, between the two of you, the arguments that have been made is that, there should be nobody, no outsider, in the in-house mechanism, which should be completely yours. Then you want to say that the government should not have any control. I mean, there are laws of the land. If you don't fulfill the conditions which are prescribed in the statutory and sovereign laws of this land, then why should you be expecting any kind of protection from the Supreme Court, which is established under the very same constitution? So please answer. I mean, you seek to become larger than the sovereign nation itself. You don't want any control. You don't want any supervision. You don't want any outsider to be there in the grievance redressal mechanism. And yet you choose to come before the very court, which is established under the constitution of the country. Please answer this dichotomy and your locus.
Certainly, Your Ladyship. Certainly, we submit to the jurisdiction of this honorable court. We are submitting to the jurisdiction of we are submitting to the Constitution of India. We are seeking our rights under the Constitution of India, and we are humbly under the aegis of the Constitution, Your Lordships. For the first question, I would like to posit before this honorable court that Article 32 grants every citizen the right to approach the Honorable Supreme Court for redressal of fundamental rights. And if you would kindly look at the cause title of the very case, Your Lordships, we are impleading the managing director, who is a citizen of India, as the first petitioner here. He is representing the entire platform, and therefore, since the managing director here has the rights under Article 32, and this has become a common practice, Your Lordships, and therefore the writ petition would be maintainable. That is all we contend. With regard to the second question that Your Lordship posed, Your Lordships, I humbly submit that, of course, we claim the security of the laws of the land, and we submit to the laws of the land so far as they are constitutional, Your Lordships. These rules, which have been enacted by the executive, are completely arbitrary. Certain provisions of the rules, we're not saying the entirety of the rules are completely violative. We are saying certain portions of the rules are ultra vires the Constitution, in that they require us to breach privacy of our users as well, and various other things among that, Your Lordships. And therefore, also, Your Lordships, they are claiming a wider ambit than the Parent Act itself. They are not in furtherance of the object of the Parent Act, and therefore, we challenge the constitutionality of the rules. We certainly want the interference of the judiciary in the matter, Your Lordships, and we submit to the jurisdiction of the judiciary, certainly. We are not above the sovereign nation. We are not above the judiciary. We are not above the Constitution, certainly, Your Lordships, if that satisfies the questions, Your Lordship.
So one more question I had is that you have raised a contention that encryption does not allow you to identify the originator of a message. But is impossibility a defense to a sailor law? If it is, your technology is not allowing you, so you change the technology. So how are we to uphold the technology? Just
Your
because...
Lordship, certainly, Your Lordship. May I answer the question, Your Lordship? Your Lordship, firstly, these rules came out in February 2021. And every intermediary was given only 3 months to make such significant changes to their platforms. Now, Your Lordship, Section 69 of the Parent Act only permits or I guess tells the intermediaries to assist in the decryption or investigation process. Rule 4 Clause 2 is asking us to make such significant changes which entirely changes the nature of the platform. We are supposed to record all the live audio chats, which is a huge thing, Your Lordships, and which will require a certain amount of time, in fact, a substantial amount of time. We were not afforded that opportunity on June 1st itself. This entire fiasco ensued.
No, but are you ready? Are you ready to do it if your time is given? Do you not want to do it, or do you think it's not correct? You have to make a call.
Yes, Your Ladyship, certainly. We believe that recording the conversations is going to breach the privacy of our users, which is why we think it is very unethical on our part to break end-to-end encryption and record every conversation. But, Your Lordships, we completely want to cooperate with the government under any investigations and provide with less intrusive means, as Rule 4 Clause 2 provides us. We seek to enforce less intrusive means in this regard, Your Lordships, in order to assist the government in their investigative procedures. So, and also, Your Lordships, 4 Clause 2 never makes a mention of recording the conversations. They're making no mention of recording a conversation. They only say, provide us the first originated information. And we're ready to do that with less intrusive means. We are not ready to record the conversations, Your Lordships.
Originator, you will display.
Sorry, one other question. You've been saying that no hearing was afforded to you, and there was a blanket ban that was ordered, and the ban is under Section 69A, which was existing even previously prior to these rules came in, right? Are you aware of any provisions which sort of detail a hearing process or allow you or permit you a hearing under 69A?
Your Ladyship, under 69A, firstly, I would like to bring this to the attention of this Honorable Court, that under Section 69A, a notice needs to be served to the petitioner platform in order to remove or block user access to information that is violative of government policy. No such notice was served upon us to remove any content, Your Lordship. We were only served a notice to identify the first originator. So when no notice has been served to us under Section 69A, they cannot straight away go ahead and ban the application. In fact, Section 69A does not provide for a blanket ban.
Right, but is there any, are you aware of any procedural, any other rules which actually allow for the hearing process?
Certainly, Your Ladyship. Under the impugned rules itself, Rule 4 Clause 1, the proviso, clearly states that no such liability shall arise on the part of the officers of the platform unless they have been afforded an opportunity to be heard. It's clearly mentioned that. If I may also read it out for your kind attention, Your Lordship. Would that be necessary?
Sure, please go ahead.
Certainly, Your Ladyship. It says, provided that no liability under the Act or rules made thereunder may be imposed on such significant social media intermediary without being given an opportunity of being heard. This was Rule 4, Clause 1, Subclause A, the proviso, Your Lordship. Have I satisfied your query, Your Lordship?
Very well, thank you.
Much obliged, Your Lordship. With Your Lordship's permission, I would seek to proceed to the next issue. May I know from the Court Master how much time I have? I'm afraid of the time.
You have 2 minutes.
Your Lordships, if I may seek an extension of time to just present my second issue very quickly.
Very well. How much time?
5 to 8 minutes, Your Lordships, that would be it.
So 5 minutes.
Certainly, Your Lordship, certainly. In inclusion of the 2 minutes that I already have.
Go on.
Certainly, Your Lordship. Thank you very much. Your Lordships, I seek to posit that the arrest of the grievance officer, that is petitioner number 2, is completely unconstitutional and without the authority of the law. Because, Your Lordships, first of all, as my co-counsel had already contended, that it is not aligned with the procedure that the IT rules themselves provide. So here we see a very selective enforcement of the rules by the respondent state itself. They should have followed a 3-tier grievance redressal system that they themselves have provided for. But rather than going from the grievance officer to the self-regulative mechanism to the interdepartmental committee, they go straight from the grievance officer to the police station. And therefore, there is a breach on their part in enforcing the rules. Rule 11, 12, and 14 of the rules specifically provide for the 3-tier mechanism that I'm mentioning here, Your Lordships. Also, there was...
I have one, query here, and both for you and I think your co-counsel as well. My sense is that both of you are a little confused in terms of applicability of the 3-tier mechanism. I don't think the 3-tier mechanism is set up for intermediaries in the first place. So when you're saying that somebody did not approach the 3-tier mechanism or a certain level, I don't think that would have been possible, because what is prescribed for intermediaries is only the appointment of those 3 officers: compliance officer, nodal officer, and a grievance officer. But there is no, the rules do not say that the 3-tier mechanism needs to be set up by intermediaries.
Your Lordships, I would humbly beg to differ here, because this 3-tier mechanism has been in place for intermediaries, and news publishers have also been included into the ambit of intermediaries in the rules.
Publishers, right? Again, publishers are people who are curating news and publishing news, whereas intermediaries are people who are hosting information. So, and if you see, part 3, which is where the 3-tier mechanism or the grievance mechanism has been prescribed, it has been specifically prescribed for publishers.
The point that is being made is either you are a publisher or you are an intermediary. Can you be both?
You cannot be both. Or are you both? In your assessment, are you both?
Certainly not, Your Lordships. We are an intermediary only. Publishers have been included within the ambit of intermediaries, but certainly we do not claim to be a publisher. And if Your Lordships don't allow, we will relinquish that claim happily.
So if we have 79.3, please see the section 79.3 of the IT Act. Does it apply to intermediaries or publishers? Are publishers covered within the 79.3, the 3 activities which are contemplated there?
Yes,
do you engage in any of the 3 in order to avail or not? Do you initiate the transmission, modify?
Is Your Lordship
Section 79.3.
Section 79.3. 3. Your Lordships, it shall not be applicable upon us, Your Lordships, because there I have a specific submission that an intermediary would be made liable to any third-party information in that regard only when the intermediary is not removing the data that is residing in or being controlled from the computer resource that is being used to commit the unlawful act. Here, Your Lordships.
And 79.2?
79.2, Your Lordships, we would not be liable under the exceptions of 79.2 and 3. We would claim the safe harbor under 1 because the 2 exceptions would not apply to us, Your Lordships.
But in order to claim the exception under 79.1, you have to comply with 2?
Certainly, Your Lordships. We are in due compliance. That is what we are contending.
So if you are in due compliance with 2, then all the 3-tier mechanism which apply to publisher would not apply to an intermediary. So you have to make up your mind, you are an intermediary or a publisher.
We are certainly an intermediary, Your Lordship. We are not publishers in this regard.
All right.
If I've satisfied the queries of Your Lordship, may I proceed?
Yes, please.
One question. Considering you are an intermediary,
yes,
is the protection absolute under section 79? Here you have actual knowledge of the events. There is a case of Sanjay Kedia, I think, where the court has categorically observed that if you have the knowledge, then you cannot claim that liability. So what is your answer to that?
Your Lordship, we claim the protection of section 79, subsection 1, because we did not aid or abet in the spreading of the information or the statement. In fact, we complied with due diligence in order to find the maker of the statement. Also, Your Lordship, this statement is not being circulated on our platform. This statement was being circulated on the platform of Ultragram, from where it was supposed to be removed. This statement was not being circulated or stored anywhere on our platform. Therefore, we should not be held liable for the statement made by the offender.
But the source and the origination of that statement is your platform. If you remember the Bazi.com case, where the director was vicariously liable for posting of the obscene clips by somebody else. So there was no FIR was not quashed in that particular case. So what is your answer to that?
Your Lordship, firstly, the section 79, subsection 1 would grant us safe harbor from the acts of a third party. And secondly, when we are in compliance of the procedures of due diligence, when we are trying to find the real offender, we are in compliance with the due diligence procedure, and therefore we would not be held liable for the acts of the third party, Your Lordship. We
actually in Bazi.com, it was finally quashed by the Supreme Court. One part of the provision was quashed by High Court, and the balance was quashed by the Supreme Court. And that's when the whole intermediary issue came and the rule was amended. If
the law was amended, yes.
Yes, but it was, FIR was quashed against the MD of Bazi.com, Mr. Avneet Bajaj.
Thank you.
Please, if you're finished, that's it.
That was my submission, Your Ladyship. If I may be allowed to proceed to the prayer, considering that I've made my submissions, the blanket ban being unconstitutional and the arrest also being unconstitutional, and without the authority of the law and without the authority of any legal provisions whatsoever. Your Ladyships, if I may only be allowed 1 minute to present the prayer.
Sure, just 1 minute exactly.
Certainly, Your Lordship, I will finish within 40 seconds. Wherefore, in the light of the aforementioned, we plead this honorable court to adjudge that the IT rules 2021 do not withstand the basic structure doctrine test for determining the constitutional validity, that the IT rules are not under the permissible ambit of delegated legislation under the primary legislation, that is the IT Act 2000, that the blanket ban on the petitioner platform, petitioner number 1, is unconstitutional and without the authority of the law, and that the arrest of the grievance officer of the petitioner platform, that is petitioner number 2, is completely unconstitutional. And we also request this honorable court to pass any other orders or directions or reliefs that this honorable court may deem fit in the interest of justice, equity, and good conscience, all of which is humbly prayed on behalf of the petitioners. Much obliged, Your Lordships.
Thank you.
The council solicits permission to begin.
Yes, please proceed.
Much obliged, Your Lordship. The council seeks permission to address the bench collectively as Your Lordship.
We will.
Much obliged, Your Lordship. Warm greetings, Your Lordship. May I please this honorable court, this is the council appearing on behalf of the respondents in the present case of Gossip Box LLC and others versus Union of India. Would Your Lordship appreciate a brief perusal of the facts present in the instant case?
Please go ahead. Please go ahead.
Sorry, can you read that?
Would Your Lordship appreciate a brief perusal of the facts present in the case?
I don't think so. Ms. Patti, would you like them to repeat?
No, ma'am. I think we can just.
All right. Just go ahead.
Much obliged, Your Lordship. The council, on behalf of the respondents, will be dealing with three issues. Issue 1 will be taken up by me, and issue 2 and 3 will be taken up by my co-counsel. If Your Lordship is pleased, may the council begin?
Yes, please.
Issue 1, whether the blanket ban on Gossip Box is unconstitutional and without any authority. It is submitted that the test for determining whether an act affects law and order or the public order is to see whether the act leads to disturbances in the current life of the society so as to amount to a disturbance of public order, or does it only affect a mere individual? At this juncture, it is extremely pertinent to look into the meaning of public order. Anything that disturbs tranquility or public peace disturbs public order. Thus, communal disturbances and strikes promoted with the sole object of exhorting unrest among workmen are offenses against public order. Public order thus implies absence of violence and an orderly state of affairs in which all the citizens can peacefully carry on their normal avocation of life. The said restrictions imposed by the government of India is also in line and in perfect consonance with Article 14 of the Constitution of India, which permits reasonable classification by the state for the purpose of achieving specific ends that helps in the development of the society. And the country of India being a secular democratic nation, the basic thread on which the country stands is the development. Therefore, this order, the complete ban, is completely in consonance with the Constitution as it aids in the development of the society. In S. Rangarajan versus P. Jagjeevan Ram and others, while interpreting Article 19, Clause 2, the High Court borrowed from the American test of clear and present danger and observed, freedom of expression demands that it cannot be suppressed unless the situations created by allowing the freedom are pressing and the community interest is endangered. I'd like the Lordship to note this point, that freedom of expression demands that it cannot be suppressed unless the conditions created are so pressing that the community interest is endangered, which is very much the case in our present case. The community interest stands highly questioned and endangered. The anticipated danger should not be remote, conjectural, or far-fetched. It should have proximate and direct nexus with the expression. The expression of thought should be intrinsically dangerous to the public interest. Hereby, I would also like to quote J.S. Mill in his essay on liberty, who emphasized that the only purpose for which power can rightfully be exercised over any member of a civilized community against his will is to prevent harm. Unlike the USA, which says Congress shall make no law abridging the freedom of speech, the Indian Constitution in Article 19, Clause 2, attempts to strike a very intelligent and a very fine balance between individual liberty and state control. It authorizes state to make certain reasonable restrictions. Alongside, the preservation of public order is one of the added grounds for imposing restrictions on freedom of speech and freedom of expression. The term public order is of broad import and synonymous with public peace, safety, and tranquility. The state may, in furtherance of public order, prohibit and punish. First, utterances tending to incite a breach of the peace or riots. Second, use of threatening, abusive, insulting words, behavior in any public space, or meeting with intent to cause a breach of the peace. It is submitted that morality is an adequate framework to resolve conflicts between rights.
Would you not think that the statements made on that chat, gossip, whatever forum, were very innocuous? I mean, whatever results they may have had, it was not a consequence of the statements made. And therefore, you can't really indict a person, or you can't really take such drastic action.
With due respect, Your Lordship, I choose to differ because there were certain gender remarks also made. Gender, where it was said that women should be restricted entirely to household chores. This statement, along with the communal remarks, the two coupled make a very huge difference and diffidence in the society, especially a society which stands on the strand of sovereignty and democracy. Over there, making remarks against leaders who guide us, who are shaping the policies for us, and making remarks against the gender, the commanding gender, as I may call it, the women. I think the remarks made were highly outrageous, and it was not at all what should be done in a secular country, in a democratic country.
I agree. But we hear gender remarks every day. Don't you hear gender remarks every day? I mean, are they inciting you against public order just because it is a gender insensitive remark?
Not exactly, Your Lordship. However, speaking when there is a conversation between two people and there are gender insensitive remarks made, it is definitely under my control to persuade the person standing in front of me. But if the same remark is made over a public platform in front of hundreds of others, I am not sure if I will be able to deal in the manner as I would be dealing in private or in with someone in private. Therefore, the remarks being made on public platform makes the entire event more outrageously wrong and insightful. And it's not just about the gender sensitive remarks being made, but also the communal remarks that are being made. It stands totally against the very thread of the democracy in the society. And it has been promoting enmity between different groups.
I thought democracy stood for appreciating difference of opinion.
I am pretty sure the democracy appreciates the difference of opinion. However, there is a difference between expressing opinion and promoting hate speech. There is a difference between saying that the particular action is not good or a particular person is not doing an act in a certain way. But there's a huge difference when you say that this particular gender is not good for the society. Therefore, the difference in the levels of the remarks being made and the derogatory remarks being made, remarks cannot be said.
You are only saying a woman's place is in the home. You're only saying a woman's place is in the home or something to that effect. Now, give me what you think is an example of a hate speech in some other context, and then compare it with this.
Could you pardon your question? I couldn't understand it to the full of my capacity.
I said, forget gender for the moment. This was a gender insensitive remark. Tell me of an example of a statement made which incites people, and compare it with this statement and tell me if this statement does not pass muster.
In this case, a particular religion was targeted. For instance, if today, say the ruling party or any social, as the Shiv Sena in the present case was a socio-political group. Say an XYZ socio-political group today says for the party, for the ruling party, the leader of which is Muslim, and the statement made is that the entire constituency is in shreds because of being led by a Muslim leader. This would
by a minority community, you say.
Yeah.
Say minority community, yeah, and then
they make this. However, in this case, a particular religious group was targeted, And so in my real life, I am using the specific example of a particular religious group to as a way to draw an analogy of the depth of the remark made, which was not only insensitive, but also communal, derogatory, and highly against the public order and tranquility of the country. This is my only
All right,
submission.
please go on. Sorry. Go on.
Just one more question. Just one
Yes,
more question I have.
yes.
Now let's take this event offline. Today we are today because of this application, that online application, and you are proceeded against them. If this event was happened on a ground, would you be taking action against the people who organized the tent and the speakers? Because one of the speaker in the event utilized all of that to make a communal speech. Would you be taking action against the guy who arranged for the tent and put up those speakers, loudspeakers, through which the speech was made? Would you be taking an action against them if it was in an offline world?
Your Lordship, it largely depends on the effect that is created by the particular act.
It results in a riot, assuming it results in a riot.
Yeah,
but would the local tent operator be responsible because he had installed those speakers through which those speech was communicated throughout the part of the cities or a particular area? Would that local tent operator who's just installed loudspeakers, would he be guilty?
Along with the local tent loudspeakers, the person who will be guilty will be the one promoting dissent and the one directly involved in the act, along with the one who has been in the promotion of the act. Therefore, it totally depends on the liability depends on the action that has been created. The amount of result of the action created by the liability, that is what imposes liability.
If WhatsApp messaging service is used to give threats to somebody, would you take action against WhatsApp or the person who has given the threat?
In this case, intermediary will be held liable, WhatsApp will be held liable, and when the person would be, if the originator or the user is identified, then he also will be held responsible equally because of promoting hate speech.
All right, go ahead.
It is submitted that morality is an adequate framework to resolve conflicts between rights. Depending on the rights in question, the Constitution may demand that they be balanced, or alternatively, that the hierarchy between them be enforced. Constitutional morality provides a solid framework to tackle issues of fraudulent commercial speech, misleading information about drug use and magical remedies, mandatory health warnings on cigarette packs, etc., etc. And this is entirely because it justifies for the restrictions within the Constitution in a very systematic way, that is by taking the route of Article 19, Clause 2. Over here, it is also of importance that during the First World War, a man distributed leaflets to those who were conscripted, encouraging them to abandon or obstruct the conscription. Over here, he was convicted for espionage. Therefore, in determining reasonableness of a restriction, the Supreme Court reviews it under the average prudent man standard and is guided by certain other principles. That is, the restriction must strike a balance between freedom and social control. Secondly, it must bear a rational and direct relation to the object that the legislature seeks to control. And thirdly, it must not be arbitrary or excessive. In the case of State of Madras versus V.G. Rao, the Supreme Court observed the test of reasonableness, wherever prescribed, should be applied to each individual statute, impugned, and no abstract standard or general prescription or prescribed pattern of reasonableness can be laid down as applicable to all cases. It is highly objective and it is highly subjective at the same time. The nature of the right alleged to have been infringed the underlying purposes of the restrictions imposed and the extent and urgency of the evil sought to be remedied by the disproportion of the imposition, the prevailing conditions at the time, should all enter into the judicial verdict very judiciously. In evaluating such elusive factors and forming their own conceptions of what is reasonable in all circumstances of a given case, it is inevitable that the social philosophy and the scale of the values of judges participating in the decision should play an important part. Further, in my lordship, I wouldn't take much time. Further, in the case of Chintaman Rao versus State of Madhya Pradesh, the Supreme Court very aptly and very articulately summed up the scope of the term reasonableness as follows. I'll be quoting the judgment. The phrase reasonable restriction connotes that the limitation imposed on a person in the enjoyment of right shall not be arbitrary or of an excessive nature, beyond what is required in the interest of the public. I repeat, beyond what is required in the interest of the public. The word reasonable implies intelligent care and deliberation. That is, the choice of a course which reason dictates. Legislation which arbitrarily or excessively invades the right cannot be said to contain the quality of reasonableness unless it strikes a proper balance between the freedom guaranteed and the social control permitted. It must be held to be wanting in that very quality. Thus, restrictive legislation will not be ultra-vires if it satisfies the test of reasonableness, which it very much does in the present case, Your Lordship. It is within the ambit of Article 19, Clause 2. Such a restriction may be held unreasonable only when it is too stringent and therefore unreasonable, or only when it does not fall within one of the interests mentioned in Article 19, Clause 2. None of which is the case here, and hence the ban is very much constitutional and in consonance with the authorities. Thereby, it is humbly submitted that the blanket ban imposed on gossip works is in interest of maintaining public order and peace and is therefore reasonable. Thank you, my lordship. And if your lordship is pleased, I would like to hand over the mic to my co-counsel to deal with further issues.
Please.
Yes.
Thank you. Thank you, your lordship.
Lordship, is the council audible?
Yes.
Much
Yes.
obliged, your lordship. Warm greetings, your lordship. The council seeks permission to address the bench as your lordship. Much obliged, your lordship. The council number 2 will be dealing with issue number 2 and 3, which are subdivided into further grounds. Issue number 2 is whether the arrest of the grievance officer of Gossip Box is in consonance with the constitutional norms. It is most humbly submitted before this honorable court that the order directing the arrest of the grievance officer was in consonance with the constitutional norms because of the following grounds. Firstly, there are penal consequences associated with the non-compliance of the 2021 rules. Your lordship, for an intermediary to avail the protection of safe harbor immunity under section 79 clause 1 of the IT Act, they must follow the due diligence requirements under part 2 therein. Consequently, if an intermediary fails to do so, the intermediary becomes liable for offences under various laws, including the IT Act and the Indian Penal Code. Further, if an intermediary fails to furnish the information required by a law enforcement agency, or if it fails to block access to information when so directed, the IT law prescribes that such offences are punishable with an imprisonment or which may extend to 7 years along with fine. Your lordship,
should penal laws be made by the executive?
Pardon?
Penal laws, should criminal laws and the right to give a punishment, can it be made by rules? Can it be made by the executive?
Your Ladyship, the penal provisions are contained in the parent statute itself, that is the IT Act itself.
Which section do you say will cover the present rule, the amended rule?
Your Ladyship, section 69A will cover and...
Just read it. Just
sure,
read it.
Sure, Your Ladyship. Section 69A of the IT Act states the power to issue directions for blocking for public access of any information through any computer resource. Clause 1 states that where the central government or any of its officers specially authorized by it in this behalf is satisfied that it is necessary or expedient to do so in the interests of the sovereignty and integrity of India, defense of India, security of state, friendly relations with foreign states of public order, or for preventing incitement to the commission of any cognizable offense relating to above, it may be subject to the provisions of subsection 2 for reasons to be recorded in writing by order, direct any agency of the government or intermediary to block access by public or cause to be blocked for access by the public any information generated, transmitted, received, stored, or host in any computer resource. And subsection 3 states that an intermediary who fails to comply with the direction under subsection 1 shall be punished with an imprisonment for a term which may extend to 7 years and shall also be liable to fine. Also, Your Lordship, under section 87 of the IT Act, it has been mentioned that the central government may by notification in the official gazette and in the electronic gazette make rules to carry out the provisions of this act.
So do you think it's covered?
Yes, Your Lordship, it's covered. The penal provisions are covered.
I'm trying to understand. I can't see it. I can't see it. One, there is a vice of excessive delegated legislation. Second, penal law where the consequence for non-compliance may be X if a person doesn't obey is different from imposing a punishment of the nature that you are seeking to and arrest the person. You can block it, as has been said.
Your Lordship,
isn't it excessive?
Your Lordship, it isn't excessive in this case. If we regard to the consequences that had taken place in the circumstances of this particular case, because in this riot, 10 people were killed, so many lives were lost, property was destroyed. So somebody has to take onus of the events that have occurred because of the communication that was held on that platform. Therefore, the intermediary has to be liable, and somebody has to, and the grievance officer being the authority of being the major authority who has to take the responsibility on behalf of Gossip Box has to be arrested in this regard.
How is intermediary being equivalent to grievance officer? He is just an officer of the company. So how are you placing the subclause 3 liability on a grievance officer?
Your Lordship, since the grievance officer has undertaken the duty to has taken the responsibility, he has certain onus and he represents the Gossip Box in a certain way. Because it states the safe harbor immunity is only accessible to the intermediaries if they follow the due diligence requirements and they comply with the directions given by the government, and they have clearly failed to do so, which the council will be elaborating in the further issues.
But none of it is done at the instance of the platform or the grievance officer, right? His role is to redress grievances, right? And due diligence, basically, you know, they have complied with due diligence requirements. If somebody would have given them notice, they could have perhaps taken down the entire group or the or the conversations. But why is it that he is arrested for actions which he did not take himself?
Your Ladyship, because the grievance officer was asked to give the information about the first originator of information, and he was asked to give the information about the user ID of such user who had made those derogatory remarks against a particular religion and against women. But the grievance officer had denied to give the particular information demanded by the government, because they alleged that it is against their end-to-end encryption policy, which the council is challenging in this particular case.
So he is arrested because he did not obey the order of the government, or he is arrested because of what happened on the platform?
He is abetted, your leadership, on 2 grounds. He did not comply with the requirements of the IT Act, IT rules, and secondly, on as an abettor of an offense of under section 153 of A of the IPC.
Is mens rea in his case absent or present?
Mens rea in this case.
In case of the grievance officer, is absent or present?
Your Lordship, in certain cases where the sovereignty and integrity of the nation is compromised, the liability becomes strict, and therefore mens rea is not included in the statute. So it would be a strict liability offense, Your Lordship. If Your Lordship would are pleased with my arguments, may I continue? Much obliged, Your Lordship. It has been held.
We are pleased.
Much obliged, Your Lordship, Your Ladyship. It has been held by the Delhi High Court in X versus Union of India that the 2021 rules impose a higher threshold of diligence upon the intermediaries, and more particularly upon significant social media intermediaries. Significant social media intermediaries are those intermediaries which are having more than 50 lakh registered users. And if they fail to comply, it results in the exposure to a high number of criminal allegations and complaints being registered, where the intermediaries also become liable. Therefore, the arrest of the grievance officer is justified, as Gossipbox had clearly failed to comply with the new IT rules. Rule 3, Clause 1J, further mandates an intermediary to provide information under its control or possession and assistance to a government agency as soon as possible, but not later than 72 hours of receipt of an order for the purposes of investigation. Gossipbox had violated this rule by refusing to give the details of the first originator of the audio clip because of its end-to-end encryption policy. Your Lordship, social media intermediaries are, as they are concerned, Rule 4 of the 2021 rule prescribes an additional due diligence to be observed by such entities. Your Lordship, recently the Supreme Court in Ajit Mohan and others versus the Legislative Assembly, NCT of Delhi, has dismissed the writ petition and not provided any interim protection to a leading social media platform, and has also elaborated that the state is free to take any action against them as per the relevant laws of the country. This implies that they could become liable for offences under not just one but several laws, including the IT Act and the Indian Penal Code. Your Lordship, having noticed the basic statutory architecture in INSEA relevant to the questions under consideration, it would be good to examine how the foreign courts have dealt with the liability of the intermediaries in similar matters. Explaining that an equitable obligation of confidence arises upon an intermediary, the Honorable Supreme Court of the New South Wales of Australia, in its decision in X versus Twitter, INC has ruled as under. The council would state the exact judgment. The court has held that where a third party such as Twitter comes into the possession of confidential information and is put on notice of the character of the information and the circumstances in which it was unlawfully obtained, it becomes subject to an equitable obligation of confidence. Your Lordship, I repeat, it becomes subject to an equitable obligation of confidence. Therefore, it is liable to be restrained from publishing such information. Your Lordship, the next round of the arrest of grievance officer is the spreading of false information through Gossipbox, which led to the protests and riots. Your Lordship, the internet has revolutionized the way in which the people interact. However, it has brought with it a host of problems like hate speech, terrorist recruitment, fake news, illegal lobbying, and personal data theft. Therefore, Section 79 of the IT Act provides intermediaries with qualified immunity as long as they follow the prescribed due diligence requirements and do not conspire, abet, aid an unlawful act. However, the protection lapses if an intermediary with actual knowledge of any content used to commit an unlawful act or on being notified of such content fails to do so. Your Lordships, the Delhi High Court in MySpace INC versus Super Cassettes seems to hold that in cases of copyright infringement, a court order is not necessary and such an intermediary must remove the content upon receiving the knowledge of the infringing works from the content owner. Your Lordship, in this case, it seems that the intermediary protection provided in this case was considerably less than the actual knowledge requirement under Section 79 as read down by the Supreme Court in Shreya Singhal versus Union of India's case. Therefore, Your Lordship, the Council humbly submits that it is given in the factual matrix that one of the members of the alleged voice chat rooms of Gossip Box had recorded the conversations and had posted it on various social media platforms. The audio clip went viral and the same was debated over various national news channels, leading to riots and communal tensions in India, which further led to protests in the Capital Territory, and more than 10 people were killed. Therefore, it is humbly pleaded that if intermediaries like Gossip Box do not find solutions to the misuse of their platforms, they are liable to be treated as abettors and to face the legal consequent actions. Therefore, Gossip Box has played an equal role as an abettor and has to face consequences of the legal action. Therefore, the arrest of the grievance officer under Section 153 for inciting riots and under Section 153A of the Indian Penal Code for committing offences against the state by disturbing the public tranquility, national integration, and public order is justified, as safe harbor immunity under Section 79 of the IT Act is clearly not applicable in this case. Therefore, and as well as the restriction imposed on his personal liberty is covered within the meaning of Article 19, Clause 2 of the Constitution in respect of public order. Your Lordship, if you are pleased with my arguments, may the Council proceed to the next issue.
One question here. When you're saying actual knowledge, have you, has any of the courts examined what amounts to actual knowledge in the case of intermediaries?
Your Leadership, actual knowledge amounts to when the intermediary has been notified by the government to take down a content or to take down any infringing content in case of copyright infringement. And even if the user whose copyright infringement has been committed, if he informs to the intermediary, it is considered as an actual knowledge.
So, were any notices issued to the platform in this case, which would amount to actual knowledge, and then you're saying that that was not complied with?
After the events that had occurred, it was mentioned in the factual matrix that the government had issued notice to the Gossip Box to identify the user ID, and they demanded the details of the originator of the audio clip, which was shared on various social media platforms. And the grievance officer of Gossip Box had denied to give the information of the first originator as well as the user ID of such a person. Your Ladyship, we did not demand the recording of the whole recording of the audio clip. We just demanded the user ID of that particular person so that he could be identified and punished. Your Lordship, this government did not intend to curtail the liberty of the grievance officer too. We were compelled to do so because of their actions as well.
Therefore, my question is that your first notice was simply to demand information or the first originator's information, right? Whereas
yes.
what you would have done is sent a notice that this is the contentious content on your platform and you should take it down, and they would have taken it down, right? In which case, the need for asking for first originator or the need for initiating an arrest would not have arisen in the first place.
Your Ladyship, I would beg to differ, Your Ladyship. The audio clip was not shared on Gossip Box. It was shared on various other social media platforms. So Gossip Box did not have the authority to take down the content because it was not shared on their platform. It had somebody from the audio chat who was a participant of the audio communication that was going on, in which those derogatory remarks were passed. He had recorded the whole conversation through his own device, and he had circulated the audio clip on various social media platforms, which was further shared, and it went viral all over the country, and it was debated. There was no means to take down the content. That is why we had to since we were left with no other option, we had to demand the user ID and the information about the first originator of that audio clip.
Did you take action against the other messaging applications also?
No, Your Lordship, not yet.
So then the same content for which the grievance officer here has been arrested was also available on other platforms, like you said, right? What action was taken against the other platforms then?
Your Leadership, because it would lead to shifting of liability. They had just shared the video clip. They had not originated the video clip. We have to suppress the origin of the whole mischief. We do not have to shift the liability from here, from this app to that app to that app. It might be shared on Facebook, Twitter. And if we go on punishing each and every app, then it would harm our digital economy as well.
So then what you're saying is that you took action because there was content which was questionable in nature, right?
Yes, Your Leadership.
And after that, notices were issued for demanding information which were not complied with, and therefore you arrested the grievance officer.
Yes, Your Leadership.
For which actions are being taken are now available on other platforms also. So how is it that the other platforms are completely, have no liability at all and no action has been
Your
taken?
Leadership, the other platforms are complying with the government during the investigations, and the other platforms are complying with us because they cannot identify the first, because more than 2,500 users were speaking in that voice chat room. So it was not possible to identify it in the audio clip. It was not an option.
Okay. Thank you.
Much obliged, Your Leadership.
What is your answer to end-to-end encryption, which is a technical, limitations which the company has? What is your answer to that? Like a bank has given you the locker keys. Now bank cannot access your personal lockers. So how that gossip box becomes liable in that scenario?
Your Lordship, the council will deal with this issue in the next issue. It has been mentioned very in detail.
Sure.
Much obliged, Your Lordship. The third issue is whether identifying the first originator of information is justified and not contrary to any law. It is humbly submitted by the council for the respondent that according to an all-established dictum, the fundamental rights, including the right to privacy, is not absolute, and it is subject to the reasonable restrictions mentioned under Article 19, Clause 2 of the Constitution of India. And it is very important to note that such an order to trace the first originator under Rule 4, Clause 2 of the new IT rules shall be passed only for the purposes of prevention, investigation, punishment of an offense leading against the sovereignty, integrity, and security of India. Your Lordship, in 2020, the Five Eyes Alliance, along with India and Japan as signatories, released an international statement stating that end-to-end encryption poses significant challenges to public safety, and therefore stated that their intention that there must be backdoors for law enforcement agencies in such services. Your Lordship, in relation to more serious offences impacting the sovereignty and integrity of India, security of the state, and other such matters, a significant social media intermediary is now also mandated to enable the identification of first originator of information on its computer resource under Rule 4, Clause 4 of the new IT rules. Your Lordship, in the case of Honorable Grand Chamber of the Court of Justice of European Union in Google Spain versus Agencia Spano, the court had opined that identifying the first originator for restrictive purposes in the garb of protection of the security of state is reasonable, because in absence of such directive in this technology-driven society, the spread of fake news may lead to many problems, including intrusion to public peace and security of the nation could be compromised. Your Lordship, since time is running out, the council pleads for an extension of time for 3 more minutes.
Please go ahead.
Much obliged, Your Lordship. So, as laid down by the Honorable Supreme Court in the most celebrated case of K.S. Puttaswamy versus Union of India, there were 3 tests in regard to curb the right to privacy, and those tests were legality, necessity, and proportionality. To satisfy the test of legality, there must be a valid law allowing for the invasion of privacy, and the rule enacted should be in consonance with the reasonable restrictions given under Article 19, Clause 2. As regards necessity, over the years, India has witnessed an increase in cases of mob lynching and riots arising due to fake news being widely spread on social media platforms. Therefore, investigative agencies sometimes takes the help of social media intermediaries to trace the origin of the provocative and nefarious online messages that cause the violence. However, these intermediaries were reluctant for providing the information owing to the privacy concerns of the users. Therefore, it was necessary to enact such a law, that is the new IT rules 2021. To satisfy the proportionality requirement, it is important and necessary to protect the public interest as well as to maintain law and order. The rules impugned aren't out of scope of proportionality because the rule itself restricts the state to use the information for some specific purposes that are important in social interest. Your Lordship, in the case of Google India versus Private Limited versus Vishakha Industries, it was held that safe harbor immunity is available to social media intermediaries, but they should act responsible. And it is not always a state, but private players also have to ensure public safety and order. Your Lordship, in EQ6 Solutions INC versus Jack, the Honorable Supreme Court of British Columbia had opined that no action can be taken against Google to enforce the injunction in US courts, but that does not restrict the ability of this court to protect the integrity or deciding the limits of the safe harbor immunity. Therefore, this council humbly submits that not giving the information of the first originator based on their end-to-end encryption policy is not within the constitutional mandate.
One point, counsel, you mentioned that to enact a law, you read out from the judgment that to enact a law. So, but what is the nature of these regulations? Are they law? And they do seek to regulate 19(1)(a) and Article 21 to an extent? Can that be done by the rulemaking power of the executive, or only the parliament can do that?
Your Lordship, under Article 13, Clause 3(a), law has been defined to include orders, regulations, rules, and bylaws. So therefore, the rules also fall within the ambit of the definition of law. It has to be treated as law.
Then the government of the day can continue to frame all sorts of laws. Why do we need parliament?
Because the parliament frames the main statutes and the government frames the rules for complementing those statutes. Where because the IT Act was silent as to the specific requirements of significant social media intermediaries, therefore these rules were passed so as to make a specific provisions dealing with the liability of the intermediaries and the due diligence requirements that need to be followed by these intermediaries. It was necessary to do so in the prevailing digital era.
Fine.
Much obliged, Your Lordship. Conclusively, the council submits that since this Gossip Box is a corporate company, therefore the council invokes the doctrine of lifting of corporate veil, which means ignoring the corporate nature of the body of individuals incorporated as a company. It allows a company to perform juristic actions in its own name as well as to sue and to be sued. Therefore, the doctrine, by virtue of doctrine of lifting of veil, the grievance officer of Gossip Box can be arrested for grounds of non-compliance with the new IT rules and for the grounds of inciting riots and propagating against the integrity and sovereignty of the country. If Your Lordship are pleased with my arguments, then may the council proceed to the prayer.
There's one question. So in every case there is a violation by a company, we can lift the corporate veil and proceed against the officers?
No, certainly not, Your Lordship, not in every case, but this particular case was very grave because more than 10 people were killed because of the riots that were caused during the communications, because of the and huge amount of property was also destroyed, and this affects the integrity, sovereignty of and the national interest of the country, and nowhere personal interest of a person is given primacy over the social interest. The social interest has to be given primacy over more dominance over the a single person's interest, Your Lordship.
Thank you.
Much obliged, Your Lordship. Wherefore, the council may the council proceed to the prayer. Much obliged, Your Lordship. Wherefore, in the light of the facts stated, issues raised, arguments advanced, and authorities cited, it is most humbly prayed before this honorable court may be pleased, firstly, to declare that the order mandating the arrest of the petitioner is constitutional. Secondly, to declare that the blanket ban on the petitioner's app is constitutional. And thirdly, to uphold the constitutional validity of the Information Technology Intermediary Guidelines and Digital Media Ethics Code Rules 2021 and or pass any other order or orders as this honorable court deems fit and proper in the interests of justice, equity, and good conscience. And for this act of kindness, the respondent shall be duty bound and forever pray. All of which is humbly praised by the counsels for the respondent. It was an honor to plead before this honorable court. Much obliged, Your Lordship.
Thank you.
Your Lordships, I pray for your kind permission to proceed with the presentation of the rebuttals.
Please.
Much obliged, Your Lordships. Your Lordships, I would like to bring it to the notice of the learned opposing counsels. They cited S. Rangarajan, the judgment, on page 12 of their written submissions as well as the arguments, acknowledging that anticipated danger should not be remote. However, here, the arrest of the grievance officer is absolutely remote and non-proximate to the riots. And even the statement, as was duly mentioned by her ladyship, was absolutely remote. It could not incite a reasonable and prudent man to cause rioting. How do the respondents justify on this point? Your Lordships, the second question. The opposing counsels mentioned that the organizer of the hate speech should be equally liable. Why has the respondent state not arrested Mr. Pansu, who was the moderator of the room, who he allowed the user to speak? Is it because he was a member of the ruling party? And is the arrest and the ban completely politically motivated? The next question for them, Your Lordships, is that they say that the ban is completely reasonable while it is violative of the rule of audio alterum partem and is not supported by a single authority or a single statutory provision. I want them to justify the ban in the light of Article 14, Your Lordships, and I request them not to cite Section 69A of the Information Technology Act, since it does not provide for a blanket ban. Your Lordships, we also want them to address the overbroadness of the Information Technology Rules of 2021 with respect to the Parent Act, that is the Information Technology Act 2000. Why are the impugned rules wider than the Parent Act, Your Lordships? We would like them to elaborate upon that. Also, Your Lordships, as the respondents themselves have exonerated our grievance officer, that is petitioner number 2, from all liability, from removing the content that we were not circulating in the first place, why are they not releasing petitioner number 2? Or as they say, that the petitioner number 2 is a scapegoat for the offenses that other intermediaries who were actually circulating the content had caused. They had caused the riots. So why has the petitioner number 2 been scapegoated? And why is he not being released, considering that he was not authorized or was able to remove any information that was not there on the petitioner platform in the first place, Your Lordships?
The council seeks permission to answer the rebuttals.
Go ahead, please go ahead.
Much obliged, Your Ladyship. Since they have made a very staunch allegations against the respondents, The council humbly pleads that the petitioners have been beating around the bush since the start, and they have become the torch bearers of privacy. However, it is to be noted that the petitioners, that is the intermediaries themselves, store the private information of their users, and they use it for their specific purposes to design personalized ads which they provide to the users to earn more and more profit, and they just want to evade responsibility. They want to write the benefits of their and they want to earn the profits, but they do not want to take accountability of the misuse of their apps. Your Lordships, most of the CEOs of these intermediaries are living abroad in US or Canada or UK. They do not live in India as well. Therefore, there has to be some representative in India which has to take onus of the misuse of their platforms. If they are becoming, the safe harbor immunity is clearly not applicable in this case, Your Lordship, because they have not followed the due diligence requirements, and they have completely vitiated the rules, the 2021 rules, as well as the parent statute itself. Your Lordship, as the council would like to quote this Supreme Court's judgment of in Kedarnath Singh versus the state of Bihar, wherein it was held that a speech falling under sedition will disrupt and endangers the authority of the government and resultantly affect the sovereignty of the country. It is therefore the duty of the government to make sure that they are restricted so as to prevent a situation of anarchy. Your Lordship, therefore, if we draw an analogy in this case, the onus of the lives that were lost lies on the state. The state has to protect the welfare of the people. The state has to protect the lives of the people. The state has to take actions against these intermediaries, because if we fail to do so, they will repeat it again and again and various such occasions will occur. And the council would also like to state the maxim of atris magis valeat quam period, which is a rule of construction which states that when the constitutional validity of a statute is under question, it is to be constructed in such a manner that it is made effective and not completely made void. These as well as the council would like to the non-compliance of the due diligence requirements enshrined under the rule part 2 of the rules, impugned rules, will invite various forms of liabilities upon the plaintiffs, upon the petitioners, sorry. The platform they provide that must be supervised by them. And in the anvil of the fundamental right of trade and occupation, this profit-making oriented company can't be let off for the damage that has been caused because of their Lordship. However, the very genesis of the fundamental rights enshrined under the Constitution of India and its jurisprudence is based on social contract theory propounded by John Locke, Thomas Hobbes, and Jean-Jacques Rousseau. According to this theory, people will surrender a part of their right to the sovereign, which in the current context is state, and the people will be protected by the sovereign in return. So the formation of state is mainly focused to ensure stability in society. Here in this case, to maintain the public order, tranquility, it was important to do so. Since the grievance officer has also failed to comply with the investigation procedure, he has completely denied to give the information, to provide any sort of information or assistance. We were left with no other option but to arrest the grievance officer. And we were left, and since we wanted to curb the we wanted to curb such an events from happening again, we had to ban the app for some time. And this ban is not permanent. This ban is temporary. We will lift the ban once we feel that it is necessary to do so. Your Lordship, much obliged, Your Lordship. These were my rebuttals against their allegations.
Where do you get this fact that the ban is temporary?
Pardon, Your Ladyship?
I said, where do you get the fact that the ban is temporary?
So the ban is temporary. It was given in the clarification round, your leadership.
Oh, I see. Thank you.
May I be permitted to just ask
Much obliged, your
one
leadership.
question to my learned friends on the opposite side, if your lordships would permit? Just one question.
Very well.
I have also given the question in the chat box. I don't know whether your lordships can refer to it, but can my learned friend please cite the specific paragraph of the factual matrix given to us, the addendum or the moot proposition, which says that the petitioners herein, the CEOs, are residing elsewhere, or B, that the petitioners are storing any kind of information for targeted ads, as you have very rightly pointed out in your sir rebuttal. So I would just like you to please cite the relevant paragraph of the factual matrix, because I'm afraid I don't think you're arguing on the facts of the case. That is my question posed to you.
Very well pointed out by my learned son from the other side. It has not been given in the factual matrix. However, we were drawing an analogy to deny how they are becoming the torch bearers of the right to privacy of the users.
All right, good. Thank you. Are we done?
Yes, ma'am, we are done. I request all the participants to leave the meeting so that the judges can come to a conclusion who is going to be the winner of the second virtual NISA moot court. And
You're
we will
putting it very clearly.
Apologies.
Thank you, but everybody was great. Thank you.
Thank you. Everyone was excellent. Thank you.
Everyone was absolutely excellent. I think, the defendants have a tough position here overall in general, but I think you all did very well.
I request the participants to leave the meeting.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Well done, everyone.
Thank you, your lordships. It was really an honor to present before your lordships and see you in person for once.
Yes, indeed, your lordship. We had seen you only on social media apps or Google. It was a live experience for us.
Council, you want to ban all the social media apps.
We do not want to ban, because in this particular case it was required to do so. We had to do so. We were left with no other option. We did not intend to do so. We want